I already told you before Alyssa's mother died, she brought her to the doctor to get checked for sexual abuse. As far as Sarah knows, that check came back negative, but there must have been something going on that made Barbara feel compelled to take her daughter there. And then we have Alyssa's third grade teacher, Diane Boardman, who Alyssa told at the age of 9 that her father was having sex with her. Now this should have been a rap. As far as I'm concerned, this is a teacher. They're trained to handle things like this. They're trained to know what to do and who to talk to and who to go to. But instead of going to CPS, instead of going to the school administration, Diane Boardman went to Michael Turney. And why did she go to Michael Turney? Because she was sleeping with Michael Turney. Diane Boardman, who was married, was having an affair with Michael Turney. And Sarah remembers her being around quite a bit. She's even in some of their home videos.
So Diane Boardman was Alyssa's teacher. And my dad's first girlfriend after my mom died, his first and last girlfriend that was serious. And I loved her, to be honest. I thought she was great. I'd seen her at school functions. She was always super nice. She had a daughter that was my age. She had a son that was Alyssa's age. So everything really seemed to fit in. We would go camping. We would have birthdays together. She took us to get our hair cut. She was very involved in our lives, and we were very attached to her. At a certain point, it's my understanding that she was having an affair on her husband, and my father didn't know, according to him, and they broke up. But during this time when they were still together, Alyssa went to her and said, "I'm having sex with my dad." And I mean, I don't know what her exact reaction was. It's my understanding that she did confront my father about it, to which my father said, "Oh yeah, Alyssa kissed a boy and she thinks that that's having sex." So it didn't go any further than that. She didn't say anything until the police came and interviewed her many years later, when the investigation reopened around 2008.
And Michael Turney, he completely downplays this incident. During an interview, he doesn't say that the teacher came and said anything. He said a couple neighbors had mentioned to him that Alyssa thought she was having sex. Not with him, but just having sex. So he approached Alyssa about it. This is a direct quote from Mike Turney during that interview. "What are you talking to these people like this for, Alyssa? I mean, we've had child protective services all over the place since your mother died." And she says, "Well, yeah, Dad." She says, "Don't you have sex when a boy kisses you and sticks his tongue in your mouth?" "No, honey, that's not sex. You're not going to get pregnant." Laughs. But with Alyssa, you'd have to have known her. She was just very naive to many things, didn't comprehend the repercussions of what she did. And I was very offended by a police officer saying that it made her dangerously socially incompetent. It did not. It made her more of a task for a parent to protect Alyssa and keeping her in school, end quote. I don't speak like that. There's a lot of uhs and ands and weird things that I just wanted to get the quote correct, but obviously I don't speak like that.
Even before my mom died, I was hit by a car, and Child Protective Services took me immediately into their care. So that definitely happened. And then around second grade, I must have been 6, so Alyssa would have been about 10. I remember CPS came back in our house. It was my understanding that a relative had called them, stating that we might have been not being fed and not be treated appropriately. So I remember that. They came in, they talked to us, and they took us, one by one to speak to us. So they were definitely around. There were numerous reports of Child Protective Services.
Do you know what relative would have called?
Yeah, it's my understanding that it was my Aunt Teresa on my mother's side. This is after she's estranged from the family. Apparently she had talked to my brother John, who reported this. And John would have been 14 maybe at the time, 15. He reported that we didn't have enough food, that we weren't being taken care of, that he had to get us ready for school, that type of thing. To which I remember we always had enough food. To be honest, I don't ever remember being hungry. But I remember being unkempt and not having to take baths and nobody brushing my hair for an entire summer, which is a true story. And the neighbor girl came over and brushed it out and yelled at my dad. I think that there was some truth into what he said. But I was 6, so I can't judge how much food is enough. I work with kids, I used to work with kids in the foster care system, and it's still atrocious. Their motto is trying to not take away as many kids as possible, which I get. But it leaves a lot of kids in really bad situations. But yeah, CPS must have been called throughout our entire lives at least 5 times, if not more, including the calls that my father made to them that were preemptive. And again, I think that comes from her saying, "I'm going to call CPS," and he says, "Watch me, I'll do it right now and tell them you're going to call. They're not going to believe you."
And when he says, I was very offended by a police officer saying that it made her dangerously socially incompetent. Do we believe that a police officer ever said that?
I don't think that they said that. He says that they stated that in an email, which I would love to see this email or like try to get access to his old account. But the thing is, in the affidavit from the same detective he accuses of saying this affidavit written by this detective says that my father said that Alyssa had ADD and that it was probably likely that she didn't have it. So why he would say both things doesn't make sense to me.
When asked if he had a typical parent-teen relationship with Alyssa, Mike answered, well, I'd like to think it was, with the exception of having to watch over Alyssa to make sure that she didn't put herself in harm's way, such as her job at Jack in the Box. I mean, she's just started a job there, and the problem we had was that Alyssa didn't understand the dangers of giving out her phone number to men coming through there. The interviewer asks, did you go to her place of work too? And he responds, I certainly did. I would go there and check to make sure. The interviewer asks, what would you do? And Mike Turney responds, well, I didn't catch her doing it. The interview asks again, yeah, but what would you do when you went there? And Mike Turney responds, just to look at her, to watch where she's working at and make sure everything's okay. I'll link the interview and I'll give you the timestamp where he says it. But when the interviewer says, what did you do when you went there? Just to look at her, he said, just to watch her. It's very creepy. So this is actual footage of Mike Turney driving to Jack in the Box, where Alyssa worked, and recording her while she worked. And you'll see oftentimes that he will search for her in the building and zoom the camera in on her so that he can find her. At times she's just doing her job, wiping the table down. She's not doing anything wrong. She's not leaving. She's not talking to anybody she shouldn't be. And yet he sits there and watches her while she's at work.
Jack in the Box.
You got me in trouble, Dad.
So not only was he recording her without her knowing, he was going to work and sitting there and watching her while she was at work to make sure she didn't leave work. But as far as we know, according to her managers, Alyssa was a good employee. She didn't show up late, she didn't leave early, she didn't miss work. So why would he feel the need to go there and watch her? Possibly to let her know that he was watching? Possibly to let her know that wherever she went, whoever she talked to, whatever she did, he knew about it, he was there. Remember the letter to her friend where she'd said that her dad told her that her brother was calling CPS and he knew things and they were all sleeping in the same bed together? This is manipulation. This is control. These are tactics used to scare somebody into thinking that you know more than they know. You know more than you actually do. And remember those contracts I told you about earlier that he made Alyssa sign, what seemed to be standard parental contracts at first, but on a closer look, there was one item there that was not standard, that was not normal. And the item that Mike Turney had Alyssa sign her name next to was, I've never been molested or abused by my father, Michael Turney. And this contract was written up and signed and notarized within a month before she went missing. And he called CPS a week before she went missing. If my daughter calls and says I'm abusing her, just ignore her. She wants a car and she's mad that I'm not giving her one. All the statements that friends and family had made to the police after the fact. Alyssa claimed she'd woken up one night bound and gagged with Michael Turney on top of her, driving her out to the desert to try and molest her. And when she resisted, he made her get out and walk home. And a nephew of Michael Turney's who had stayed at the Turney household for 6 months in the 90s, he has a startling story to tell about what he discovered there. It was late one night, he wanted to watch a movie. There was a bunch of VHS tapes sitting around, and he grabbed one that was labeled Dr. Dolittle, and he popped it in. But what he saw when it started playing horrified him. He saw a girl that he claims was Alyssa Turney. Her face was covered by newspaper. She was naked from the waist up. and she was lying there still, not moving. He says there was another girl in this video, a girl with darker hair, about the same age, also with newspaper covering her face, also naked from the waist up. Now, Mike Turney's nephew, he claims that he recognized this girl as being one of Alyssa's friends from school, that he had actually driven them someplace before, but he couldn't remember who she was or what her name was. And he said straight out, I don't care if newspaper was covering their faces. That was Alyssa. I know it was Alyssa. They were just laying there, motionless. He wasn't sure if they were asleep or if they were unconscious, but Mike Turney was in that room on the videotape, just sitting there, watching. The nephew, his name is David. To this day, he feels incredibly weighed down by the guilt that he didn't grab that videotape, that he didn't tell somebody then. He was just so shook by it, and he was going through stuff in his own life at that time, that he pretty much just put it back, and he packed his things, and he left. And he never came back to the Turney household. But he is pretty sure that it was Alyssa on that tape. Mike Turney denies the existence of the tape. He calls his nephew a drunk, basically, trying to discredit him. But there were other tapes found in Mike Turney's house that are not made up, that are very true.
So it's my understanding that they found a snuff film that was specifically recorded back to back to show the rape and murder of this woman. So like this certain part was looped. Whether he did that himself or didn't, I don't know. I mean, he had access to equipment like that, and he had recorded things off of TV and VHS to DVD my entire life, so he's very skilled at that. So it's entirely possible. It's also my understanding that they found sex tapes from like prostitutes and possible old girlfriends, which again, like your sex life, your business. I think the snuff film is scarier than him recording anything sexual with girlfriends. But yeah, I mean, these things were found, and he admits to being a very sexual man. But yeah, the snuff film takes it to a different level. That's really scary. He's had access to some like black market videotapes for a long time. And what I mean by that was that my brothers had the first Star Wars movie on VHS, like black market, before it came out on VHS. I remember he got the movie Titanic before it came out to VHS back in the day. So I think he had resources and people that he might have met at like gun shows that were able to get him things like this social security card and this driver's license and freaking Star Wars before it came out in the 70s. Like, I know it seems like kind of a small deal now with, everything you can pirate from the internet, but that's hard to find Star Wars in the 70s before it comes out on VHS. Like, that's pretty intense. So he had access to things like that. So in my head, I'm thinking he probably met somebody at a gun show or had a friend that had similar interests and that they're sharing these types of resources.
Mike was so overprotective and controlling with Alyssa, and he wasn't like that with any of his other kids, ever. And maybe you'd think, oh, well, it's different, fathers are more protective of their daughters, but he wasn't like that with Sarah either. Sarah says that she was pretty much allowed to do whatever she wanted, even though Mike would always be worried about Alyssa doing drugs or drinking beer. He would buy the beer for parties for Sarah. She tells a story once when they were in Costco, and at this point, her boyfriend was living with her at Mike's house. They had the master bedroom, and she said to her dad, hey, you should get me a mini fridge and stock it with beer. And he simply looked at her and said, okay, what color mini fridge do you want, and what kind of beer do you want in it? So he wasn't this overprotective, smothering parent with any of his other kids. He was that way with Alyssa because he was abusing her, in my opinion. And he didn't want her to tell anyone. So he didn't want her to have friends, and he didn't want her to go out, and he didn't want her to be in a position where he didn't know where she was and what she was doing at all times. And he wanted her to know that he knew what she was doing and where she was at all times, so she'd feel less safe to confide in anybody. But you know what? She did confide in people. She confided in a lot of people, and nobody did anything. Mike Turney did all he could to discredit Alyssa to everybody that he talked to. He would call her stupid. There's a phone call where he's talking to another guy, which I think is his brother, and he called her a stupid bitch. There's a videotape where Sarah is recording, and Alyssa yells to her sister, Sarah, Dad's a pervert. And Mike doesn't respond to this at all. But once he realizes that Sarah's still recording, he acts strange and he tries to get it away from her and stop the recording. And he yells something over to Alyssa that made me incredibly uncomfortable. The whole videotape made me uncomfortable, but you take a look for yourself and let me know what you think.
the red button.
Why?
Hit the red button now.
I don't want to. How do I record?
Hit the red button.
I'm recording.
Dad! Dad! Dad's a pervert.
Yes, sir. Give me the camera now. And you're still recording. And Alyssa is stupid moron. Alyssa's a stupid moron.
In my opinion, Mike Turney had been sexually abusing his stepdaughter from a very young age, and he did all he could to exert as much control and influence on her as he could get away with to make sure she didn't tell anyone, and if she did, no one would believe her. He told everybody she had a learning disability. He told everybody she had ADD. He told everybody she was rebellious, that she didn't understand the consequences of her actions. She would say things that weren't true, that she lied. He did everything in his power to make everybody think that Alissa Turney was a problem child, a juvenile delinquent, somebody who couldn't be trusted, somebody who, if she possibly ever came forward and said, my father is molesting me, people might not believe her because, she's a juvenile delinquent. Her father says so. And it seems like this kind of abuse has been going on for generations in the Turney family. I'm going to switch gears for a moment and go back several years and talk about a woman named Donna Russell. Donna Russell was 14 when she met and fell in love with a 17-year-old James Turney, Mike Turney's brother. From the moment Donna was born, she was physically and mentally abused. She was told by her parents that she wasn't wanted. They'd never wanted her. She was neglected. She was treated like crap. And she was made to feel like she didn't matter. When she was 4, she saw her father put a gun to her mother's throat. And when she was 8, she saw her father stick a gun in her mother's stomach. She explains that this is why she believes she ended up in a relationship with somebody who was equally as abusive mentally and physically. It was all she knew, and maybe it was all she thought that she deserved. Now, this next story, it's very upsetting, and it's told by Donna. So I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it happened. I'm telling you what Donna says happened, and it gives some insight into the mind of James Turney, remember, brother of Michael Turney. According to Donna, she also had been sexually abused as a child by her brother, and her parents knew about it. They knew about it, and they didn't do anything, and they didn't try to stop it. But when Donna started seeing James, he was older. He was 17, she was 14, and her mother didn't like it, so her mother threatened to turn James into the police. And Donna had already confided in James, the guy that she thought she loved, about the abuse from her brother, and about how her parents knew about it. And instead of comforting her, instead of being there for her, instead of getting her as far away from it as possible, James Turney took her and her brother out into a field and told them to have sex. He claimed to Donna that he did this for them, for their relationship, so they could be together unbothered by her mother. That if her mother ever went to the police about, James and his age, that he could simply just put forth the proof that it was actually Donna's brother who was sexually involved with her. And that's why if she had been physically examined, it would look as if she had been sexually abused. But really, I don't think that's the truth. I don't think, if that's what he told her, I don't think it's the truth. I think he did it for his own sick amusement and his own sick enjoyment. Because James and Michael Turney have quite a bit in common. Donna married James when she was 16. They had 4 kids, and it wasn't a good marriage. He was abusive. He was neglectful. It was just a bad marriage. He was possessive. He was controlling, and he shared his brother's need to document everything, to record everything. He also had cameras all over. He also was very specific about keeping everything and writing everything down. By the time she was 28, Donna had filed for divorce, and she was living with her mother. But she had to go back to the house she'd shared with James and her children to get some of her things. On February 10th, 1974, James Turney shot his wife Donna 3 times. There was a few different versions about the story, how it went down, who was there. But I think one thing is pretty clear. You don't accidentally shoot your wife 3 times in your bedroom. It doesn't accidentally happen. According to Donna and James' daughter, Renee, who was 11 at the time, her uncle Mike had come to pick the kids up and take them to McDonald's. They were still in the driveway when they heard the shots happen inside the house. So Renee ran back in. She ran into her parents' bedroom. She threw open the door just in time to see her mother lying in a puddle of her own blood, face down, and her father pointing a gun at her mother, about to take a 3rd shot. But the opening of the door startled him, so his hand kind of twitched, and the shot didn't hit home. I think it ended up in her hip or something like that. Renee believes to this day that her father meant to kill her mother, that he was trying to punish her for leaving him. Renee claims she ran back out, told Mike to come to the bedroom and help, but Mike refused to. So a couple of neighbors actually had to take Donna to the hospital in their car. They didn't want to wait for the ambulance to get there, and allegedly they didn't feel comfortable leaving her there with Mike and James. So they took her to the hospital in their car. And according to Renee, after they'd left to bring Donna, Mike and James and a couple other family members, they started covering everything up. They started getting rid of evidence, including the handgun that had been used to shoot her. So it is Renee's belief that James Turney meant to kill his wife Donna, and that Mike helped him by coming to get the kids so they wouldn't be around, and then helping to cover it up after. And this would have been when Mike was still a police officer. Donna survived, but she did not press charges. She was obviously afraid, in my opinion, and for some reason, the DA did not choose to pursue prosecuting James Turney for shooting his wife 3 times, which, like I said, doesn't happen accidentally. Donna tells the story a little differently. She claims that, yes, James Turney did shoot her 3 times. Before he shot her, he thoroughly beat her, but it wasn't Renee who came in and stopped her from being killed. It was Mike Turney. For some reason, to Donna, Mike Turney is still this good guy. He had nothing to do with what happened to her. He had nothing to do with covering it up, and he always kept in contact with her after and kept telling her he had nothing to do with it. He wrote her letters upon letters saying, I had nothing to do with this. I hope you know I care about you very much. I'm so sorry that your daughter Renee thinks I had something to do with this. Hopefully one day she'll come to terms with the fact that I didn't. And that in itself is a very guilty tell to me, because if you had nothing to do with it, and the person already doesn't believe you had anything to do with it, why do you keep maintaining and restating your innocence and your lack of involvement?
So, he always had a weird relationship with his brother. They would go back and forth and argue about different things, and there would be times in our lives where we weren't allowed to speak to them, and other times in our lives where we were. So it seemed like a typical family type of situation where it's hot, cold. But they were both really bad men. There are a lot of people that have come forward and said that they did some really awful things together, and that they think that it's entirely possible that they conspired together to kill Alyssa and hide her body. For example, I reconnected with one of my cousins a few years ago. I hadn't seen her in years. And she's like, "Hi, so good to see you. I think my dad could have killed Alyssa with your dad. What do you think?" Like, literally the first thing she said to me. Because my uncle was also known to videotape his children. He molested his children according to his children. So he's a very sick man, and my father was too, and they were very close, and thick as thieves is what everybody says. I wouldn't put it past them to do any of those things.
I'm going to read you a letter from James Turney written to Donna. It's titled, Donna Marie Turney Forever. Have you found peace of mind or been able to sleep yet? I sure hope you have, because I haven't been able to. I hope your mind is open and you can see what the fruits of true love have brought to you. Just think what the fruits of true hate can bring to you. I sure hope when you find true love, you don't get in too deep, because you could lose that love like I lost mine. Maybe you will go one of either way. Maybe let hate catch up to you, or maybe self-destruction would be better. It would be quicker. Love you always. So listen, this letter was written in 1974. Whether it was written before he shot her or after, it's a threat, and it shows the amount of control that he's trying to exert over her. Just the fact that he titled it, Donna Marie Turney Forever. Even if you divorce me, even if you change your name back to Russell, you are still going to be my wife. You are still mine. That's possession. The entire letter is a not so thinly veiled threat as far as I'm concerned. Every single sentence, I can find something threatening and aggressive. Just think what the fruits of true hate can bring you. What does that mean? I sure hope when you find true love, you don't get in too deep, because you could lose that love like I lost mine. Sounds like a threat to me. Maybe self-destruction would be better. It would be quicker. Just as Michael Turney made Alyssa feel that nobody would believe her, that he was always watching and he was always controlling everything and he was the puppet master. James Turney is trying to make his wife feel the same way. I'm watching. I know what's happening in your mind. No matter if your last name's different, no matter if you're alive or dead, you're my wife forever. You'll never get away. She didn't see her kids for 10 years because he wouldn't allow it. He told her if she tried to contact them, that he would kill her and he'd kill the kids. She believed him. And why wouldn't you? I mean, the guy shot you 3 times. Why wouldn't you believe that this man is capable of anything? And you just want to protect your kids, I guess. When she saw her son at his high school graduation, she didn't even recognize him. And as soon as James Turney found out she'd been there, he kicked his son out and disowned him. Renee, James Turney's daughter, believes that her father intended to kill her mother and that he'd gotten away with murder in the past. Renee claims that her father molested one of her sisters and one of her stepsisters. When asked if she too was molested, she says she doesn't remember. Most likely, she's blocked it out if it happened, and she no longer has contact with her family. Renee's younger sister, Jamie, also has made some allegations against Michael Turney. She says when she was 13, Mike Turney asked if she would come and live with him for the summer to help him watch the boys. Now, at this point, this was very early on. Sarah wasn't born yet. Alyssa wasn't born yet. It was just Mike and the boys. Jamie agreed. She would love to go and stay there for the summer. He had a pool. He was a cool uncle. They were planning a trip to Disneyland. So she agreed, and things were pretty normal. But one night, he came in and he asked her if she would give him a back rub. And she says at this point things were pretty normal. The boys were there in the living room watching TV. She rubbed his back a little bit. She walked on his back. This isn't abnormal. My brother always had me walk on his back when I was younger because I guess it's just a thing that cracks your back. And she said everything was normal and fine, and he put his shirt back on and he went back on with his night. But later, when she was in bed, laying there trying to sleep, he walked to the door of her room and asked, "Are you asleep?" And she said, "I'm trying to go to sleep." And he said, "Well, I was just wondering if you wanted a back rub too." Creepy, right? So your uncle is standing in your room, it's dark, it's nighttime, you're in bed, and he's asking you if you want a back rub. And Jamie found it creepy as well. She told her mother, she told her father, they brought her home, and she was not sent back there again. She says, yes, Michael Turney never actually physically abused her or molested her, but she saw the signs. She knew the signs because she had been molested by her own father since a very young age. She ended up finally leaving the house at 17, but she claims that the abuse went right up until then. Everybody in the family knew. Nobody wanted to talk about it. How far does this abuse go back in the Turney family? According to Donna, James Turney's ex-wife, it went all the way up to James and Michael's mother. There was reports that James Turney was being sexually abused by his mother. So it appears that this cycle just keeps going down and down and down. And it also appears that these girls who are being completely and horribly hurt and betrayed by the people they should trust most in the world, they're being groomed. They're being made to think that this is what life is and this is normal. And that's what I believe Mike Turney was trying to do with Alyssa.
I think it's entirely possible. I don't know what's true and what's not, but the family rumor is that sexual molestation is run really, really deep in the family. And specifically, I've heard the story of my grandmother and my Uncle James. So again, I don't know, but I wouldn't put it past them. And the fact that they've continued on this tradition of molesting their children is really telling to me. I mean, we know that these things happen in cycles and in patterns, and then it goes on for generations. And I think that's most likely what happened.
What's even more horrific is Sarah Turney believes that there may be a possibility that Michael Turney was responsible or involved in the death of her mother, Barbara. Now, Barbara had lung cancer, so she was sick and she had been sent home. She knew she was dying. But the timing of when she did die was very suspicious. She died the last day of February, the day before her life insurance policy would lapse. I'm going to have Sarah tell you a little bit more about that.
It was probably about a year ago that my aunts really expressed some concerns about my mother's death. Because my entire life, obviously, I knew that my mother died of cancer. And I didn't think much more of that. It was a pretty quick turnaround. I think she was diagnosed and passed away within a year. So it was very sudden on the family. And I have very little memories of it. But I know that, we took her to California for a specialist out in Redding, California, so she could be closer. And then she came home to die. And what I'm told is that during this time, my grandmother, my mother's mother, and my Aunt Lynette had come out to the house to take care of my my mother and the kids while she was dying to help my father out. There's 6 kids in the house. It's a little overwhelming. So it's my understanding that what happened was my father deviated from the liquid morphine schedule. She was given liquid morphine orally. And he created his own type of chart that deviated from, whatever it said on the bottle. And they say that he was underdosing her and then overdosing her so that it seemed like she was in a lot of pain, and then he would give her more. And they were very scared. They said that my mother expressed concern and that she was frightened of my father at this point. So it got to the point where my mother's mom laid down on the floor next to my mother's hospital bed in the living room so that she could feel if my father was stepping over her to get to the daughter. So it got really intense. And during this time, my Aunt Lynette alleges that my father drugged and raped her. So a lot of things happened. And so by the time the day came that my mother died, this is what I was told, that my grandmother's still laying on the ground next to her hospital bed, but they go out to have a cigarette. My grandmother and my aunt go out and have a cigarette, and leaving my mother alone in the house with my father. They come back, and my mother is freaking out, begging them to call 911 because she's dying, and then she passes away. So they think that he gave her an overdose of morphine, which in my head, it's obviously really, really hard to hear that she didn't die peacefully. I always kind of thought that she did. I was never told that she freaked out and they wanted to call 911. And in my head, it doesn't seem like a way that someone from cancer passes away. It's my understanding that it's usually a slow process. They eventually accept it. And then a lot of the times they just die peacefully, as opposed to freaking out and asking them to call 911, which seems more consistent with being given an overdose of morphine.
Yeah, why would she ask them to call 911 if she was sick and dying and she knew she was dying? There's no reason to call 911 if you know. And it seemed a very short time between when she got diagnosed and when she passed. If she had left anything behind in writing that she wanted you guys to know, like did she leave letters for you guys or instructions with her sister or her mother or what should happen with you guys after, ever saying anything like, I don't want my kids to be with Mike? Because it didn't seem like they had a super great marriage. Was there anything like that?
Yeah, so it's pretty well known that they were going to get divorced before she was diagnosed with cancer. And my aunts say that she specifically told them to not leave Alyssa with my dad. Specifically Alyssa, not John, not me, specifically Alyssa. But as far as I know, there were no written instructions about what to do with us. It's my understanding that letters do exist that I'm still trying to get from my aunts that talk about the time when she was dying. It was a letter writing time. We're talking the early 90s. They live in a different state. That's how they're communicating, especially if the phone's being recorded. But what I did want to mention also was that aside from family rumors and aside from these stories, I think that the few most damning pieces of evidence in my mother's death are the fact that we know that she died one day before her life insurance policy was due to lapse. We have this documentation. She died on the last day of February, which was the last day that her life insurance would be valid. She died that day. Another really damning fact to me was that my entire life, my father told me he was going to sue the tobacco companies for killing my mother because she had been a smoker since she was 14, developed lung cancer, and died. So after she died, he didn't request an autopsy, which would have most definitely been like his smoking gun. You know what I mean? How do you sue the tobacco companies without an autopsy stating that she died from using tobacco? So the life insurance policy, not getting an autopsy, it all looks really suspicious.
Everything points to the fact that Alyssa did not run away, and Michael Turney, the last person who saw her, had plenty of motive to make sure she wasn't around to tell her story. He'd abused her for years. She was growing up. She was trying to become more independent. She was looking to her future, where she would be out from under his roof, under his thumb, and under the prison of silence he'd forced her into. He knew she was growing up. She wasn't the little girl anymore he could scare into silence. He'd spent years manipulating her into thinking that she had no power and that no one would believe her. He'd spent years letting her know that everywhere she went, he was watching. Every friend she got close to, he would cut it off. He didn't want her to have a support system that she could go to for help. He didn't want her to feel comfortable enough to confide in anyone.
Want some glitter? Want some glitter?
That call to CPS a week before she went missing, it haunts me because I think that Alyssa finally stood up and said, I've had enough. This isn't going to happen anymore. I'm going to call CPS and they will believe me. I have proof. I have something that will show them this is true. I don't want this to go on anymore. I think Mike Turney knew this time had been coming for years and she would eventually turn him in. Maybe he had known for years that he would have to get rid of her. And he did it at the end of junior year, the last day of school, where her classmates would be less likely to notice that she wasn't around. And they never went into the house where Alyssa had allegedly last been. They never went in there with blood-sniffing dogs or luminol. They brought cadaver dogs to the backyard, but why would Mike Turney bury Alyssa in the backyard? He's way too smart, way too manipulative, and way too paranoid for that. But they never brought blood-sniffing dogs inside to see if there had been a crime scene at one point, to spray luminol to see if there had been any blood spilled. And Mike Turney had a duplicate truck that Sarah didn't find out about until many years later. The same truck he had when Alyssa went missing, he at some point got rid of it and got another truck that was the same make, the same model, and the same color. Why would anyone do that? So it would appear as if it was the same truck the whole time. But if the cops ever went in to look at that truck to see if there's any sign of Alyssa in there, there wouldn't be, because it wasn't the truck he had owned when Alyssa was alive.
So I found out about the duplicate truck only a few years ago. I was at the Missing in Arizona event, which is an event that's held by the Phoenix Police Department. And the one detective that had been reassigned to sexual crimes online, Detective Anderson, was there. And I actually spoke to him about a girl that I knew in foster care that had run away and was asking for updates. And he actually started going off about Alyssa and about Alyssa's case. And he must have talked to me for about 3 hours at that event. And I was just trying to absorb as much as I could. I wish I recorded it just for my own reference to remember everything. But at a certain point, he brings up the fact that my father had a duplicate truck. He says that it was the exact color, make, and model, that it was sold in Nevada, and that they searched one vehicle, I'm not sure which one, and all they got was a bunch of dog hair. And then that was it. That he had this truck, that they were only able to search one, and that one was sold and never searched. But no, I mean, I've never seen it in any documentation or any report. He just told me, I think out of the kindness of his heart. I mean, he was fired up. He wants this. There was no lapse in trucks, no point in time in which we didn't have a vehicle at that point. But I mean, by the time that they did this investigation and searched the vehicle, the dog we had was long gone. So I don't think that they would have been able to compare the hair to anything.
So why was there dog hair then in the truck if the dog that you had was long gone?
Well, this would have been the truck that we had at the same time Alyssa was there. So we had a dog during that time. I think actually for like the last 6 months that Alyssa was there, a year, that we didn't have a dog, but we had one previously. But it's not unusual for my dad to load up animals in the vehicle and have them in there. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm just thinking about it in the moment. When Alyssa went missing, she had a cat and she had a ferret, and we did not have a dog. So where that dog hair came from is really interesting to me. Also, while we're on the subject, I just want to state that he gave away Alyssa's ferret pretty much immediately after she left. And then he got a new dog, which is my dog that just passed away, actually. And that dog supposedly scared off Alyssa's cat. So, I mean, within months after Alyssa being gone, her animals were gone. You know, he moved everything out of her room. It seemed like he was trying to erase her presence. He got rid of most of the things in her room. I mean, I fought to keep a lot of things, but I mean, her bed was gone. Her nightstand and TV stand was gone. He didn't expect her to come back. He didn't save her furniture in case. He didn't set up another bedroom for her in case, in which we had an extra bedroom that he could have done that. When she went missing, I actually slept in her room. I slept in her room every single night in her bed with all her things. And I think it was just my way of being closer to her and my way of expressing that I was sad. But yeah, I mean, when we moved, there was no preservation of her items. I had to kind of like pick out whatever I wanted and keep it. And then I don't know what happened to the rest.
When you moved to the new house, were there pictures of her put up, or did you guys not put pictures up around the house? Was there any sign that she existed at all ever in this new house?
No, I don't think that he put the family pictures back up. At one point, he had put up like my honor roll award. But no, I mean, normally we would have like a hallway of family pictures, you know, that usually Alyssa and I would put up ourselves, to be honest. And when we moved, no, there was like nothing left of her. I got brand new furniture, which was very strange. I'd never had new furniture in my life, as opposed to taking her old furniture that was like, she had hand painted mushrooms on there, you know, and it was everything that she had screamed Alyssa, and then it was gone.
So did Mike Turney go to trial for Alyssa's disappearance when he was released from prison? No, in fact, that didn't happen at all. 3 days before he was released, The two detectives were reassigned, or at least that's what Sarah was told. She was told that the missing persons unit, or the cold case missing persons unit, had been dissolved and no longer existed, and that the two officers had been reassigned to different cases or different departments. One of the police officers had been assigned to a different department, but one of them, Detective Summershoe, he was still in the cold case division, and he was still allegedly on Alissa Turney's case. But all of a sudden, he wasn't talking anymore. He wasn't responding to her emails. He wasn't communicating with her as much. In fact, nobody was communicating with her at all. Every time she wanted to talk about Alyssa, why aren't you arresting my father? What's going on? What's happening? They would just push her off and try to buy time. Eventually, they told her, no body, no crime. We can't prosecute without a body. We don't know where Alyssa is. We can't do anything. So what had changed from when Mike Turney was in prison for literally having an arsenal in his home, and the police were like, yeah, we're going to prosecute, we're going to bring him to justice, to 3 days before he got out, when the detectives were transferred, and all of a sudden, there wasn't enough. There wasn't enough to prosecute him.
So what happened was, a few days before my father was released from prison, they reassigned the two detectives. And that's when they really went silent on me. And at the time, I'm thinking, because I was told, when your father's released from prison, we will arrest him the day he's released so that he cannot combine sentences. Because if we arrest him while he's in prison, he will get a shorter sentences because he's able to combine them. So I'm thinking, okay, great. I'm nothing to worry about. So when they get reassigned, I'm thinking, okay, well, that makes sense. The case is over. They have everything they need. They're going to arrest him. It's going to go to court. There's no reason for them to be on the case anymore. And then eventually, obviously, he's not arrested, and I ask for a meeting, and they sit me down with my supposed new detective, who literally wouldn't take off her sunglasses, who would never speak to me over the phone. This is the first time I'm meeting her, and they bring in Summershoe because he's actually competent about the case. Like I said, she says nothing, and Summershoe says, we've decided that we can't prosecute any longer without a body, but we won't look for that body. You will have a billboard on every freeway in Phoenix with Alyssa's name on it, which never happened. And then he looked at me, and I'm obviously crying my eyes out at this point because I don't understand. They promised me this prosecution for so long. And he says, Sarah, your best chance is to get media exposure. And that's when I went crazy getting media exposure. And I don't think that they expected me to get as much as I have.
You had the petition, and once it hit 100,000, somebody said to you, it doesn't matter if there's 5 million signatures, it's not going to make a difference. Did that happen?
Yeah, that was Commander Christina Gonzalez when I had my most recent meeting with them in January. I said, listen, you told me to get media exposure, and I have it. I have millions of media impressions. I have a media deal. I have a petition with 100,000 signatures. What more is it going to take? And she said, it doesn't matter how many signatures you have. We need a body. And I said, so what are you doing to look for this body? And she said, well, Sarah, if we knew where the body was, we would go get it. She said, I need a body. And I said, I disagree. There are other cases that have been tried and won with less evidence in this same county. Said, we are not setting a precedent. You guys are just refusing to do it. Well, no, and Summershoe's always been on the case, Sarah. And I'm like, what about that email that you sent me saying that you're dissolving the cold case unit and he's no longer on the case? Or the other email that's the highlight on my Instagram story with the word savage that says, and furthermore, Detective Anderson and I are no longer agents for your case. What about those? And she says, I can't speak to anything you were told in the past.
But there is a cold case unit.
Yeah, no, they lied to me. They 1,000% lied to me. One detective was legitimately reassigned to sex crimes online. But the other detective, Detective Summershoe, continued to work on other cases that he had prior to that, including all the girls that he introduced me to. He was never taken off their cases. And now, according to them, never taken off my case. But every time I email my current sergeant, who's supposed to be in charge of the case, I copy Detective Summershoe, and I copy the commander of the unit, and he always writes back and copies no one. And then I write back and copy everyone again. It's a fun game we play.
Detective Summershoe was on the podcast from a couple years back. It seemed like he was trying to be helpful, and he was, and you can hear him, you can hear in his voice, he knows that Mike Turney did this. He knows, and it bothers him that, so he's trying to raise awareness, but now it's like crickets from him. Do you think that they threatened him and they said, don't do any more media, don't go on these podcasts, you're causing problems for us? That pretty much is what happened.
Yeah, I do. I think that's exactly it. Because those two detectives I know care very much. When I went to the Missing in Arizona Day, Detective Anderson, who had been legitimately reassigned, spoke to me for like 3 hours about the case. He knows it better than I do. He's more passionate about it than I am. To be like, he wants this so much.
And at this time, Mike Turney is living in Phoenix, a free man. He's not only a man who planned a domestic terrorist attack, who wrote about how he was going to kill multiple people, but a man who is suspected of molesting his stepdaughter for years, and who, if you ask me, is directly involved with her disappearance. So who here lives in Phoenix right now, or the surrounding areas? Who here has children who live in Phoenix or the surrounding areas? And how many of you feel comfortable knowing that the man I just talked about, the man I just described, is walking free? A man who has a penchant for guns and explosives and abusing little girls, allegedly. It's not been proven, right? So it's alleged. Don't come for me, Mike Turney. Sarah is trying to get justice for her sister and trying to put Mike Turney, her own father, on trial. No one's asking for a witch hunt. No one's asking for him to be thrown into prison with no evidence, no due process. But we want a trial. We deserve a trial. He deserves a trial. He needs to go in front of a judge and a jury and answer questions about Alyssa. What happened to her? Where is she? When did you last see her? And let's get a straight story out of you for once. Mike Turney is a compulsive liar. He lies about everything. He told everyone for years that he was in Vietnam and he had, killed a Viet Cong, and it was all this dramatic story once again. He went on national television and said he was in Vietnam, and only finally, when he was put under oath and asked, "Were you in Vietnam?" did he say, "No, I was never in Vietnam." No, he lied about getting fired from the union 3 weeks before his wife died. Sarah has the paperwork. He's a liar, and over the years, he's told multiple different stories about Alyssa and where she could be. He told somebody he saw her get on a bike with a biker and go off into the distance. He has so many different accounts of what happened. We need to get him in a court of law and ask, once and for all, what happened that day? All the evidence of the abuse and the trauma that he put Alyssa through until she went missing needs to be put in front of people, and they need to see it. Since he's been out, Sarah has only seen him once. She met him at a Starbucks in Phoenix and they talked and she tried to get answers. She's always trying to get answers out of him and he always laughs it off or gets defensive or tells a different variation of a story. I'm going to play you a clip of a conversation that Sarah had with Mike Turney at the Starbucks where she said pretty much, "You took my sister away." And listen to his response to her.
Mike said it wouldn't be pleasant, either one of them, and he was right. So.
Oh, I could make it so much more unpleasant. I'm trying to be civil here. And you know it.
Well, that's good.
So don't act like a victim. Because you're not.
I'm not acting like a victim, Sarah.
A little bit.
I'm acting like a father wanting to know how in the hell my family fell with this stupid shit that was pumped out.
Dad, when have you done what's in my best interest?
What does that got to do with this thing about Alyssa? What have I done in your best interest?
Taking away arguably the most important person in my life has to do with my best interest a bit, yeah. And my future and the whole course of my entire life, yeah.
And you and Alyssa were that close, huh?
We fought like normal siblings, but would we be closer now? Yeah. Did Mike and James fight? Yeah.
Mike says
Did Rhett and Mike
anytime
fight?
they get in the phone conversation, they do.
That's what siblings do.
He didn't say, "No, I didn't take her away from you. I had nothing to do with it." Not, "I'm sorry you lost your sister. I lost her too." But that snide remark, like you guys are so close. Who does that? What kind of person would talk about his missing daughter that he's so worried about in that kind of way? Because you guys were so close. Is that the response of a father who's still reeling over the disappearance of his daughter? Is that the response of a man who's as much in the dark as anybody else about where she is or what happened to her? No, in my opinion, it's not. It's the snide remark of a man who's sick of hearing about it, doesn't want to deal with it anymore.
It wasn't honestly really until I talked to him when he got out of prison. And I said, "People are afraid of you at the union. They put up bulletproof glass. Like, it's not funny." And he laughs at it. And then I realized, like, yeah, no, he's 1,000% evil. Like, that's what's hard, is I'm still getting to the point where I can believe that he's as evil as everybody tells me he is. You know, now I tell him, you don't love me, you never loved me, you don't love your kids, you planned on killing a bunch of people, you're a horrible person. But it took me a decade to come to this point, to be honest. When he was at the trial, I didn't think that he would use those bombs. I think I accepted the fact that he made these bombs and that he typed out this plan, but I didn't think that he was going to use them. And I think that's probably just me being naive and wanting to believe that.
Will Mike Turney ever tell the truth about what happened that day? He told Sarah that if she wanted the answers, that she should come and talk to him on his deathbed.
But a murder, no, honey. You're going to have to somehow resolve that in your own mind.
Or meet you on your deathbed.
Meet me on a deathbed.
That's you said that. Those were your
saying,
words,
Sarah. I'm just saying, hang around the longer time. If you think there's a hereafter and there's an answer, you'll get your answer then. I mean, this is just a short drop in the bucket, Sarah. Life is. You know, some people get good cards, other people don't get good cards.
For a long time, it's been believed that if Michael Turney did kill Alyssa, that he buried her somewhere in the desert. He was very familiar with the desert. They spent a lot of time out there. It's where they would shoot guns and do target practice. And he had some maps of the desert with coordinates on it. But at this point today, Sarah believes that he wouldn't have buried Alyssa in Desert Center or in any of the deserts if he had killed her. She believes that a mall in Phoenix that was being built the summer that Alyssa went missing is probably the burial place for her sister.
So this shopping center is about 2 to 4 miles away from my house. It's a very quick drive. It's also an area that my dad would take me and Alyssa out to before it was this construction zone. We would go ride our go-karts out there. You know, it was a big patch of desert that we were familiar with. It was very close. And at that time, what I want to do is get the building schedule so I can confirm this. But at this time, it was being built. So it's my understanding that in a construction zone, what they do is use ground penetrating radar before they dig to make sure that they're not disturbing anything, any burial sites or pipes or anything like that. But once they do that, they do not do it again. So this thing would be full of open holes. I mean, a massive shopping center. There's a Target, there's a Kohl's, there's a grocery store, there's a million shops inside of it. It's very large. So there's a lot of concrete slabs being poured for foundations. So my reasoning is during that time, it was being built, most likely filled with many holes that have already been used using this ground penetrating radar. And my father knows this. He's an electrician. He would understand what goes into setting up wiring and digging and things like that, I would imagine. And he's smart enough to figure this out. But so again, I think my reasoning was that there's so many holes there that have already been researched that he could easily just drop her in one, cover her with some dirt, knowing that they're going to pour concrete on her. Because that's hard. When are they ever going to dig that up again? It's a mall that's, I mean, now it's been around for 20 years, but there's a Target. I mean, nobody's ever going to look at that again. Versus the desert, you know, Arizona is expanding rapidly. Phoenix is expanding rapidly. There's less desert than ever. I think it's more likely that she would be found in a random piece of desert than underneath the shopping mall. But again, I mean, that's just my guess. That what's hard is he's so familiar with so many different parts of the desert, and he had access to a lot of property up north also through his brother, through my uncle, and they're all not great people, and anything's possible. But given the time frame, you know, I think that he would have wanted to have a quick turnaround. The thought of him going to Desert Center, California, which is, you know, 3 to 4 hours away, him crossing a state line with a body, a state line that has an agricultural check that sometimes checks every single vehicle, sometimes doesn't. It just seems really, really risky.
And he wouldn't have really had enough time. I mean, he would have had enough time between when allegedly he picked her up and when he picked you up, but it would have been like a very tight fit.
Yeah, I mean, he would have had less than an hour for anything unpredictable, a flat tire, anything.
At this point today in 2019, the disappearance of Alyssa Turney is still a mystery and is still unsolved. And at this point, the police, they aren't doing anything to help Sarah find her sister or bring her father to justice. We could ask ourselves all day why. Why are the police not doing anything? Why is the DA not prosecuting? There seems to be enough evidence to at least bring this man to trial. And that's all that Sarah wants. We could ask ourselves that question all day long. The fact is, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we make as much noise as possible. The true crime community is an amazing community. Other people might look from the outside into the true crime community and say, oh, look at those crazy people, those freaks that like to talk about murder and like to talk about death and crime. They're weird. But we know that that's not who makes up the true crime community. The true crime community is made up of people who are compassionate, who are caring, who hate to see injustice in the world. And that's why we flock here to listen to the stories of the victims and their lives and what happened to them. And it's even more amazing when we have the opportunity in our hands to help one of these victims. And today, guys, we have a lot of things that we can do. There is a link to a petition in the description box of this video, and it is a petition to bring Michael Turney to justice. You can also call or write the Phoenix District Attorney's Office and ask why they have not prosecuted this man yet, who is clearly guilty, in my opinion, allegedly. Don't come for me. And the more exposure for this case, the better. I think that, honestly, Netflix should make a movie about this case because it seems like that's the only time people become interested. Normal people, like outside the true crime community, who aren't really apprised as to what's happening in true crime, that's the only time that those people really become interested in a crime story, is when it's made into a movie on Netflix. So if we can, at Netflix, to make Alyssa Turney's story into a movie, that would be great if you guys can do that. And at CrimeCon on Twitter, and ask them to give Sarah Turney her own panel next year in Orlando. She may not have any police officers who are willing to go up on that stage with her and support her, but she has this community. All the people who have covered her case on YouTube and on podcasts, all the people who are just as outraged and upset about what happened to her sister as she is, they would get up on that stage and they would stand up there with her and tell Alyssa's story. So at Netflix, at CrimeCon, and I also want to tell you that Sarah Turney has started her own podcast, and it's called Voices for Justice. I'm also placing the link for that podcast in the description box. According to Sarah, the first season is going to be about her telling Alyssa's story in her own words in excruciating detail from start to finish. She's interviewing people that have been heard from and also a lot of other people that haven't even spoken to the police. And then season 2 of Voices for Justice will feature other cases of people fighting for justice. So it's time, guys. We always want to feel like we can do more. In Alyssa's case, we can do more. We can be so loud, so obnoxious, and so insistent that no one can ignore us anymore. As far as I'm concerned, the next step is protesting outside of like the White House. And that's why I asked in my community page, does anybody know an FBI agent or somebody in the FBI? Because the FBI needs to override the Phoenix Police Department at this point and get into this case and look into it and take it out of the hands of the Phoenix PD. Because if they're not going to do anything, they don't want to pursue it, the FBI really needs to at least look at this case file. And if they do, I think that they will want it solved. So check out Sarah's podcast, sign the petition, guys. It literally takes 2 seconds. Please sign it. We're trying to get as many eyes on this and as many voices in this as possible. Go on Twitter, at Netflix, at CrimeCon, and more important than anything, be supportive and understanding in the comment section. You have to realize that Alyssa Turney is a real person who went missing and who knows what happened to her. You have to also realize that Sarah Turney is a real person, a lovely person, a person that is brave and strong, even when she's saying that her sister Alyssa was brave and strong, which I believe. Sarah Turney is brave and strong and unwavering, and she is not going to stop being a thorn in the Phoenix PD's side until they do something about this. Sarah Turney lost her mother when she was 4. She lost her sister when she was 13, and now she's pretty much lost her entire family. She doesn't talk to her father. Her mother's side of the family has been estranged for so long, and her brothers have pretty much sided with her father at this point. Even though she claims that they know he did it, they are still supporting him. She doesn't have anybody anymore. But you know what? That's not true. She has a lot of people. The true crime community is a powerhouse and a force to be reckoned with. But we are also the most supportive and uplifting people that exist in the world. And we will all be Sarah's brothers and sisters. We will all be her friends. We will all be her support system. We will all be a voice with her, not against her. If I see anything negative about Sarah Turney or Alyssa Turney in these comments, they will get removed. I don't believe in censorship, but I believe in being here for the right reasons and focusing our energy in positive ways. We are all Sarah Turney's family now, and that makes Alyssa our sister. And if this was your sister, if this was your daughter, how much would you do? What would you do? How far would you go? Please go that far for Alyssa. There is so much about this case that is just crazy. There's so much about it that I could not possibly cover. But if you guys would be interested, I've already asked Sarah Turney, and she'd be willing to go live with me sometime next week, where you guys can come on and you can ask her questions, any questions you want about the case and what's going on, about her sister, about little details that maybe you had questions about when I was describing them. Once again, there's so much. I'm sure I missed something. I'm sure I left something out. But I gave you enough to understand that there's an injustice happening here and it needs to be fixed.
And what I want people to know is that if you're experiencing something like Alyssa was experiencing, you don't have to, and that there's help, and that there are ways to safely get out of these situations. And if you told 20 people like Alyssa told 20 people, tell more. Go to another authority. Go to CPS yourself. Go to the police yourself. Get out of the situation. There is help. And I want people to know that if you are abusing a child, that there are people like me that will come for you 20, 30, 40 years later, and that you'll be exposed. So I think it's important to know that this type of behavior and relying on family secrets and thinking that that's okay and that it's not going to cause you to get in trouble is wrong. You're wrong. If you're abusing somebody, it will come out, no matter how long it takes. And the second part of that is that Alyssa still needs your help, and that I still need your help. And people always ask what they can do. And it's been different things throughout the years, right? It's been go talk to the police, call the DA, write a letter, do a petition, and none of those things are working. So right now, it's about blowing it up bigger than it's ever been. It's about getting this on Netflix or Hulu or pick your media of choice. Because that's the only way that something's going to happen in this case, is if Kim Kardashian cares or if Netflix cares. Because right now, we know that the authorities don't care and that they're not taking action, and that for whatever reason, they don't want this story to come to light. And so I need all of your guys' help to make my voice larger, because I don't know what else to do. I've tried to go through all the proper channels and it's not working. So right now, my only chance is to hope that the whole world hears about it, is mad about it, and it evokes change.
Alyssa Turney was born in April of '84. I was born in February of '84. So she'd be my age, and maybe she would have kids. Maybe she would be on YouTube. Maybe she'd have a YouTube channel. You know, she was very artistic. She was very talented. She drew the mushrooms on her dresser with nail polish. Maybe she'd have a do-it-yourself YouTube channel right now. Who knows what she'd be doing? But I promise you, what she'd be doing today and her life today would be 100 million times better than where she's at and where I believe Michael Turney put her. She begged for help. She asked for help from so many people, so many times, and nobody was there. So be there for people. Listen to children. If a child says something that seems odd, pursue it. Don't just write it off. Don't just think they're a kid, they're stupid, they're not as smart, they're not my equal. Because that's what people like Michael Turney want you to think about these kids that they're hurting every day. They want you to think that they're not smart enough, they're not good enough, they're not developed enough in their brain to understand the repercussions of what's happening. Kids understand more than you think. Kids understand when something's not right, no matter how many times you try to convince them it's right, no matter how many times that a predator and a pedophile will try to convince a child that this is normal. That child knows it's not normal and it's not right. So listen to kids when they talk, because they have something to say and it's important. Thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you understand how important it is and how much we really need to get Alyssa's story out there and support Sarah Turney in any way we possibly can. Stay kind and stay beautiful, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Through the tears, the light is faded. Heavy hearts consume all you are. Memories, they spin in circles, and every breath